they'll have a good run though, but they'll have issues.
You gotta resign.
Yeah, I know. Dude, they got signed Russell Wilson finally to a big contract, dude. Finally.
The Assembly Transportation Committee is called to order. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all the members of the Transportation Committee. I look forward to a very productive session working with all of you in this upcoming year. The nice thing I've learned about transportation that there's typically a lot of ground that we all, and I repeat all, can agree on. So we look forward to exploring that ground with you. I want to congratulate Assemblymember Asajian for being named the Vice Chair of this committee. We both served on this committee last session and also as Chair and Vice Chair of another committee last year also. And I've always appreciated his calm, collegial approach to the issues. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce the newest member of the committee staff, Tony Zupan, who is our secretary. Tony comes to us from the Assembly Arts and Entertainment Committee, and we are so happy to have her here with us. Tony officially starts with us next week, but has graciously agreed to join us today for our first hearing, where I would mess it up if she wasn't here.
We all would.
Believe me. Before we go any further, Assemblymember Asajian, would you like to make a few comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's quite an honor for me to be your vice chair. Look forward to your leadership. And as you said it, I also want to welcome all the new members and the returning members. Look forward to working with any and all of you at any given time. Please don't hesitate to any questions prior to the meeting. If you would like to visit the office, please do so. Looking forward for a great year ahead of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Asajian. With that, let's begin. We'll start by taking care of a bit of business. Establish a quorum. We'll ask committees to Establish the roll, please.
Frazier.
Here.
Ashajian.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Bloom.
Here.
Campos.
Here.
Chu.
Here.
Daly.
Here.
Dodd.
Here.
Eduardo Garcia. Gomez. Kim.
Here.
Linder.
Here.
Medina. Melendez. Nazarian. O'Donnell.
We have a quorum. So our first order of business will be to adopt committee rules and the highway naming resolution. You all received this last week for review. Are there any questions or comments?
Move approval.
I have a first and a second. So, Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Frazier.
Aye.
Frazier, aye. Ashajian.
Aye.
Ashajian, aye. Baker. Baker, aye. Bloom. Bloom, aye. Campos. Campos, aye. Chu. Chu, aye. Daly. Daly, aye. Dodd. Dodd, aye. Eduardo Garcia. Gomez. Gomez, aye. Kim. Kim, aye. Linder. Linder, aye. Medina. Melendez. Melendez, aye. Nazarian. O'Donnell. O'Donnell, aye.
That at this point is passed. We'll leave the roll open for those members that are coming to the hearing a little late. So let's move on to the informational hearing. We've invited the heads of state agencies whose work falls within the purview of this committee to join us today for a brief overview. We will move through the presentations very quickly, and I'm sure you'll have many questions. We have a couple of last-minute changes to the agenda. Members, they were just handed out, and you have them before you. Secretary Brian Kelly and Caltrans Director Malcolm Dougherty were called to join the U.S. Secretary of Transportation this afternoon, so they are not here today, and hopefully they'll be bringing back the bacon. So in their place, we have Mr. Brian Annis, Undersecretary of the California State Transportation Agency, and Mr. Kome Ashazi, Ajise, Chief Deputy Director for Caltrans. But Mr. Annis, good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. As you mentioned, Secretaries Kelly is with Secretary Fox this afternoon, I believe, at the Google campus, and I was reading the federal press release before I came in here. I think as part of the President's budget, they want to support what California's already started, looking at the autonomous vehicles. So that sounds very, very positive. Today you will hear from the entities that make up the Transportation Agency, the three large departments, which include Caltrans, the Highway Patrol, and the Department of Motor Vehicles. You'll also hear from the three independent boards, the Transportation Commission, the High Speed Rail Board, and the Board of Pilot Commissioners. And finally, you'll hear from the Office of Traffic Safety, which is part of the Office of the Secretary. You will also hear from the Air Resource Board, which, while not part of the Transportation Agency, is an entity we work frequently with to collaborate to improve the environmental sustainability of our transportation system. The Transportation Agency will, on July 1, be celebrating our second anniversary. Prior to the creation of the Transportation Agency, most of the departments that had transportation-related functions were part of the former Business, Transportation, and Housing Agency. And with that reorganization of government, the entities that were business and housing-related went over to the new Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, and some others went to the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. The Transportation Agency gained two independent boards, which previously existed in state government without an agency home. Those were the California Transportation Commission and the High Speed Rail Board. As part of the creation of the Transportation Agency, the agency secretary put out a document called the Project Initiation Document, which charted the course for the first few years of the agency. One of the things included there was the mission for the agency. So the mission for the Transportation Agency is to develop and coordinate the policies and programs of the state's transportation entities to achieve the state's mobility, safety, and air quality objectives from its transportation system. That initiation document also set out 3 key issues to work on. Those 3 key or most important issues were: 1, developing and integrating the high-speed rail program into California's existing transportation system; 2, ensuring the state's transportation system is capable of achieving the sustainability and air quality objectives outlined in AB 32 and other state legislation; and 3, developing a long-term, stable, and flexible revenue stream dedicated to the state's increasingly diverse transportation system. One strategy that the agency adopted to address these issues was to form a stakeholder advisory group and also to bring in some external expertise from outside the state. Secretary Kelly formed a stakeholder work group called the California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Group. We call it CTIP. And that group is discussing priorities and funding for our statewide transportation system. The Secretary also asked the State Smart Transportation Initiative, or SSTI, it's a group based out of the University of Wisconsin, to perform an external review of our largest department, the Department of Transportation. The advisory group, the CTIP group, has met many times over the past 22 months, and we have posted 4 white papers on the agency website based on recommendations from this group. In February of 2014, we posted a vision and interim recommendation report, and just this past month, in January, we posted 3 white papers, one related to exploring a road usage charge pilot program, a second related to tolling and pricing for congestion management and infrastructure funding, and the third related to the state's transportation improvement program and how that program could be improved for performance, investment, and transparency. Many of these recommendations of the work group were enacted in legislation last year. For example, Senate Bill 1077 required a pilot program to look at the road usage charge concept. Senate Bill 486 included several reforms to our baseline transportation programs, such as the State Transportation Improvement Program. And there are several additional proposals in this year's governor's budget, including funding for that road usage charge pilot, and also a trailer bill that would look at pricing of high occupancy toll lanes or conversion of HOV lanes to hot lanes, and of course acknowledge as well the chair has introduced a bill on that same topic, AB 194. The external review of Caltrans by the SSTI has resulted in reform and improvement efforts both completed and underway. And just this past Friday, Caltrans posted an update report from that outside organization, the State Smart Transportation Initiative, that looked at progress over the last year, because it was the goal of the Caltrans director that report not just gather dust on a shelf, but we move toward implementation, those recommendations we agree with. One of the issues that's been very helpful that the legislature and the administration have worked closely on over the past year to implement some of these 3 major issues we're looking at for the agency was the implementation of the cap and trade proceed programs last year. Of course, there are 4 programs in the cap and trade proceeds program that were continuously appropriated, and those programs will help develop the high-speed rail system integrated with other rail and transit systems, and also help achieve sustainable community goals through transit capital and operations investments, through affordable housing near transit, and lastly, through active transportation improvements to walking and biking. Caltrans adopted guidelines for the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program on December 19th. We're hoping that money will start flowing to transit operators by April 15th of this year. And the Transportation Agency plans to adopt guidelines for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program in the coming weeks, and also have a call for projects. We hope to have projects selected for the first cycle of that program by June 30th of this year. As far as work ahead, of course, the governor in his State of the State address called for action to fix and preserve our highways and roads. That discussion will likely occur in many forums over the coming months, including, I'm sure, some legislative forums. To assist the effort, the Secretary is also engaged with the CTIP group to start soliciting suggestions. We had our kickoff meeting just last week of that group to solicit ideas on different priorities for our transportation infrastructure and also to start the discussion of different funding mechanisms that we could use to reach certain priority goals for our transportation infrastructure. In conclusion, you will hear from our transportation departments today on the important work of about 40,000 state employees to keep our transportation system safe, efficient, and sustainable for both the traveling public and for goods movement. This involves a very diverse work effort ranging from testing and licensing of drivers to maintenance and construction of transportation infrastructure to enforcement of transportation laws. I again thank the committee for its time and look forward to working with you during this 2015-16 legislative session.
Any questions of committee members of Mr. Annis? Mr. Annis, one of the accomplishments you tout in your Caltrans Improvement Project report is that Caltrans has adopted NACTOs, design standards in response to the need to be more flexible. Has it worked? Have the regional and local transportation agencies seen an improvement in this area?
Well, I can tell you that there have been certain projects that the department's highlighted for us over the past few months that have come forward that do include more flexible design, separated bikeways, other areas where working with city officials, they've been able to perhaps reduce the lanes of a certain rural highway going through a local area where that capacity was not needed for cars, and instead it's used for more parking, perhaps for the businesses and things like that. So I do believe that that is starting to be implemented in the districts, and perhaps when Caltrans comes up, if they have any other examples, they'll be able to mention those to you as well.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. So if we have no other questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Baker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Annas, I draw my question in particular to the issue of safety in the Bay Area. There is a problem with the reliability of some of the radar beacons that protect our shipping industry from colliding into the Bay Bridge. Excuse me, now is one of the times of year where the shipping is most treacherous because of the fog and the weather conditions, but I understand there's been quite a problem with the reliability of the beacons that have been out for now, I think, almost 2 months. I wonder if this is something that your agency is looking into, and if not, if perhaps we can have a follow-up meeting with you to see what can be done to get these beacons either replaced or maybe even the technology replaced so that we can have a reliable safety system.
Sure. And as you note, there has been issues with these beacons that are between the piers in the Bay Bridge that are one of the important safety devices for ships, of course, with many other safety devices, but that is something that we do want to work all the time. When it was first realized that one of those beacons was not working, within 24 hours, Caltrans had replaced it with one of the several spare systems they have. But as you mentioned as well, that system, that replacement system had trouble, and it was sending a signal that was not strong enough. So we're going to work with the manufacturer to diagnose the problem. Certainly any replacement systems need to work, and we need to know they'll be ready to work if they're needed for a replacement.
Thank you, and I would like to follow up with your office, particularly given the threat to the environment and human life, but the fact that the backup plans have not been working, so see what we can do to fix that.
Okay, thank you.
And that, thank you, Assembly Baker. That will be highlighted when we have our discussion with the bar pilots later that's one of our questions. So, thank you. So, thank you, sir. We'll move on to Mr. Morales and Mr. Richard of the High Speed Rail Authority, who've asked to be moved up in the agenda to accommodate a late afternoon meeting. So we'll hear from the High Speed Rail Authority, and then Mr. Farrow from the CHP will be following Mr. Morales and Mr. Richards. Good afternoon, Mr. Richard. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, members, my name is Dan Richard. I'm the chair of the High Speed Rail Authority Board. And for new members, let me just explain that the High Speed Rail Authority was set up by the legislature in 1996. We have a governing board of 9 members. 5 are appointed by the governor, 2 each by the Speaker of the Assembly and also by the President Pro Tem of the Senate. I just want to say, as a personal matter, it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve with the Assembly's appointees, both of whom are dedicated and very hardworking for this project, Patrick Henning and Thea Selby. I'm joined here today by our CEO. We have the governing board, and then we have a professional staff. Our CEO, Jeff Morales, is the head of that professional staff, and you'll hear from him about the details of the project. But I'd just like to make 2 quick points for you to open the conversation. First of all, at the board level, we have 2 principal responsibilities. One is to set policy, and the other is to provide governance and oversight. And I don't need to tell you, when we're talking about a project of this magnitude, governance and oversight is critically important. We are accountable to you, the legislature, to the executive branch, and of course to the people of California. And I know that Brian Annis mentioned the governor's reorganization plan that put us functionally under the State Transportation Agency. I think that's worked very well in terms of collaboration with sister agencies like Caltrans. And so this is a structure that we think is appropriate for governance, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we're exercising that. Just to give you an example of our policy setting role for discussion purposes, we have, for instance, established a 30% set aside of all the monies in this program that will be spent on contracts to be set aside for small business contractors, small businesses of all types. And when you look at our initial expenditures in the Central Valley of $6 billion, that's $1.8 billion being set aside for small business. That includes women and minority-owned businesses, but small businesses of all types, because we want to make sure that the benefits of this program reach out throughout the state. So that's an example of policy setting, or the policies that we set for the use of renewable energy to power this train system once it's up and going. I want to talk for just a moment about our oversight function and how we approach that on the board, because we'll be interacting with you as we go forward, and so it's important for you to understand how we've structured this. First thing we did was, on assuming the chair, I established a finance and audit committee of the board. A number of our board members, myself included, have pretty extensive business backgrounds, and we set this up in the same way that a corporate board would have a finance and audit committee. I asked Mike Rossi, who is one of our board members, is the former vice chair of Bank of America, chief risk officer there, to head that finance and audit committee, along with Tom Richards from Fresno, a very experienced businessman. They have worked with the staff to establish the requisite metrics that we would be using to determine how well we're doing as we move forward. And this is in areas of safety, of cost, of risk, and of progress of the project. And these metrics, by the way, will be transparent not only to you, but to members of the public as we go forward, and we can talk about that. In addition, we've set up a transit land use committee to make sure that we are not only complying with our CEQA responsibilities and environmental responsibilities, but also to further create policies that would make sure that as high-speed rail is built, that we are effectively looking at the land use questions around the station. So I just want to lay that out for you as a very broad brush overview of how we are approaching this project. And we'll be happy to answer any questions, but I want to turn it over now to Mr. Morales to go into the specifics of where the project is. And I welcome the opportunity to work with you through this coming legislative session. Thank you.